Well, I am glad to welcome you this afternoon to our session, learning about micro-credentials and professional advancement accounts. I'm Laura Bilbro-Berry. I'm with the UNC System. But my superstars here are Dr. Jackie Ennis, who serves as the Dean in the School of Education. Sorry, I ran. Whew, I couldn't catch my breath. From Barton College. And then we have Erin Shoemaker from Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools, and so she is the Director of Learning and Teaching. And then we have Tomberlin, who is the Senior Director of Educator Preparation for the Department of Public Instruction. So today what we will be doing is defining micro-credentials, talking a little bit about excuse me, the proposed professional development accounts for teachers, but then also how our existing professional development systems could benefit from this new model, and thinking about opportunities for access in that regard. So we will have some questions for our rock stars here, and then we will certainly have time for you all to ask some questions as well. So are we ready to get started?
Yep.
All right. So let me get my glasses because, you know, aging is fun. My arms keep getting shorter the older I get. So Dr. Tomberlin, or I'll just call you Tom. We heard in an earlier session that the Pathways Plan proposes to use micro-credentials for teachers to demonstrate certain competencies and skills. Can you say a bit more about what DPI is doing around micro-credentials?
Sure. So DPI is currently engaged with a group called DigiLearn. And they are working on creating standards for micro-credentials in the state. So this really isn't connected necessarily to the pathways work. This work is really trying to get our arms around what does a high quality micro-credential look like, and under what circumstances would we award professional learning credits, or what we would call CEUs, for licensure renewal in the state. And so setting those standards is really important because we know a lot of the districts have already started down this road of using micro-credentials for professional learning. And so a couple months ago, maybe it's been about a year ago, the board heard from DigiLearn and agreed to have them create these standards for the state of North Carolina. The good news in this work is that it's expanded to include a consortium of southeastern states with the goal that that micro-credential would be portable across several states in the Southeast. So our teachers aren't kind of locked into, this is only, the currency is only good in North Carolina, but it would extend to other states as well.
Erin, CMS has been utilizing micro-credentials for quite some time. Can you tell us what are micro-credentials and how do they differ from traditional professional development?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you think about micro-credentials, it's a unique way to do professional development where you can really demonstrate a skill or competency. It's personalized so our teachers can go at their own pace. They can also bring their wealth of knowledge that they already have and their skill sets that they already have to the table. With micro-credentialing, we've all been in professional development where all teachers have been in professional development before, where they could probably stand up and teach the course themselves, but it was a compliance case where they had to attend. Well, micro-credentials lets them move at their own pace and demonstrate their knowledge and their skills quicker if they can, or if it's a new skill or competency, they can go slower and take their time to learn. The other thing that's different about micro-credentials is that there's the ability to demonstrate mastery in application in the classroom. And I would say that's the huge difference, right? A lot of times our traditional professional development, we sit in course, even if it's multiple days or a series, and with lacking the connection to application in the classroom and the support to do that well in the classroom. So micro-credentials requires that we have the application in the classroom and provides feedback and support along the way as teachers are trying new skills and competencies that they're learning.
So Jackie, Barton College, along with other universities, are working on micro-credentials for educator preparation faculty. Can you tell us a little bit about this work and how it might benefit pre-service teachers and also how it might be applied to existing kind of in-service teachers from your perspective.
Yes, this work actually started with legislative action. They thought that the EPP faculties needed to be able to have ways to improve their skills in technology, to be able to use it with teaching pre-service teachers. And so they got a group of us from the public school system of EPP and from the NCICU schools. And we've been working together on this, I think, 4 years now. And so we started out with saying, what do EPP, Educator Preparation Program faculty, need to know to really be effective in teaching their pre-service teachers? And we held a couple of symposiums, we gathered data, and then we decided what we do was to take the DLCs, the digital learning competencies that are there for teachers, and we made a set for EPP faculty that would match. And we worked with the Friday Institute, and we came up with the digital progress learning rubric that they had for teachers, and we adapted it for EPP faculty. And we did the same thing with the technology assessment, the STENA. Wow, the letters stand for in that one, but that was, so we send this out to the faculty of the EPPs to do the digital progress learning rubric, and it was voluntary, but they assessed themselves as a group, did it in 2019 and 2021, and sent us back some feedback so we could see where they were growing, and where they wanted help. And then the STENA piece, the individual faculty could do just to kind of see where they wanted to grow. So we thought it was really important for people to be able to say, where do we as a group want to grow, and where do I as an individual want to grow? And then we really grappled with, how will we deliver now that we know that things are needed so that people can continue to grow and improve? How would we deliver this? And after a lot of thought and reading a lot of research, we decided micro-credentials would be the best way for this. And I just jotted down a couple of things that we really liked about micro-credentials for this purpose. And the fact that they're on demand, they're shareable, and they're personalized, as we just mentioned. Now, our group really, as we mentioned, how would we use this with pre-service teachers? We honestly don't see this as being a good tool for pre-service teachers to just grab and go. We think pre-service teachers need a plan that is cohesive, that works together within all of the school. You know, we've tried before with different things. We've given teachers bits and pieces and told them to put it together, and we've just found that wasn't very effective. So this will help pre-service teachers because their faculty members will have better training, and then their faculty members can teach them. Now, these modules are online, and possibly we could say within the context of a class, I teach instructional technology. I may say within my class, we're going to do this module, but we're going to do it like as a class. You can do it at your own pace, but we're going to do this and learn from each other on it. As far as how it can help teachers down the road, this has been very much worked towards the idea of EPP faculty, but I think we could tweak it and make it available for veteran teachers. Veteran teachers are different from pre-service teachers. They've already got that foundation. They already understand the pedagogy, the content. They're looking for ways to continue to grow. So I think it's something that could be translated for them.
Well, thank you. So Erin, you talked a little bit about how CMS is using micro-credentials. Could you maybe dig a little deeper into that? But then also, how are the teachers responding to kind of this new way of doing professional development?
In CMS, we have advanced teaching roles. We've had them for quite a few years, and it's evolved over time. We have teachers who are able to have more students in their classroom, have a larger impact, to get additional compensation for that, or they are coaching other teachers in their classroom to be effective. And so, since we've done that for multiple years, we're reflecting on our practices, looking at where do we have gaps, and there are two problems that we were trying to solve for. One, we were using just student data. One of a couple of different ways, but we were heavily relying on student data to put people into those advanced teaching role positions. And we know that not every teacher has EBOS data, depending on the content area that they teach. So that left a whole group of our teachers out from the possibility of being able to apply for those advanced teaching roles. And we wanted to make sure that all of our teachers had that opportunity if their school wanted to have that role. So that was one problem we wanted to solve for. And the other was, as we were using data, student effectiveness data to put teachers into these advanced teaching roles, they're really effective with kids, right? They might not be as effective with coaching adults to do the same thing that they're doing. And so we would have people in the role and then try to hurry up and catch up and do all the PD while they're in the role, to have them be better effective at coaching, meaning PLCs, analyzing data across their school for trends. And so we thought about, what if instead of waiting until they got in the role, we started preparing our teachers for these advanced teaching roles ahead of time by using micro-credentials. They could say, you know what, someday I really want to be a coach of other teachers. So let me start developing my skill set around being able to coach. And that's where micro-credentials can come into play in that area. Right now, we're heavily using it for micro-credentials for those areas that don't have EBOS scores and data in that way, so that they can apply for and be part of advanced teaching roles and in our talent pool there. We are also using it for recertification, I guess you could call it. So everybody who are in the advanced teaching roles, every 3 years, they have to reapply to show us that they're continuing to be effective in those roles. And so we're utilizing micro-credentials for that, alongside student impact, student data as well. But I think what we heard earlier is that we need student data and we need some of the skill sets that it takes to interact with adults to move the dial with kids, right? So we're looking at both of those things. Something that we've just started to dip our toe in as well, continuing with the thought of pathways, is working with our mentors. So we started thinking about who are the next group of teachers that would be maybe interested in advanced teaching roles, who might be ready to take on that type of leadership. Maybe our mentors, they're already coaching newer teachers. And maybe if they could start earning the micro-credentials, they might see a pathway for themselves into these advanced roles. So we started offering some of those micro-credentials to our mentors as well.
Tom, I think this one's for you. The Pathways model proposes to create professional advancement accounts for early career teachers. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that might work?
Yeah, so in the Pathways model that you saw in the earlier sessions, so it recognizes that teachers enter the profession at different levels of preparedness. And so that creates a situation where these teachers are going to need different kinds of things in order to be successful, to move forward into the next phase. They're ultimately establishing themselves as an expert teacher. So you think about a residency licensed teacher who comes in, who has work experience and a bachelor's degree in content knowledge, but lacks the pedagogical knowledge. Well, that teacher needs to spend the early years acquiring that pedagogical knowledge. Whereas a traditionally prepared teacher comes with that content pedagogical knowledge, but may just need some other types of professional learning. Well, what we do know is that PD dollars in the state are very scarce. And so districts, when they're leveraging those PD dollars, they have to look at the entire landscape of their faculty and say, what's the most common thing that our teachers need? And they're shooting for the middle, in other words, and they're getting the most coverage for their dollars. This really separates these early career teachers off and targets them with funding to support them through the acquisition of those skills, up until the point where they have what we would think of today as a continuing professional license. So if you needed coursework, I think the proposed amount in the model was $2,500. So there are 3 licenses that lead up to license 4, which is the expert teacher license. Every one of those licenses, as you move into each one of those licenses, the teacher would receive $2,500 in a professional advancement account for PD dedicated to helping them move to the next stage. And this is a win for the teacher and for the districts, because then districts can target, make sure that those teachers are engaged in professional development that's helping them with those fundamental steps through that process. And teachers are advantaged because those that are involved in coursework or other activities that can be quite expensive have a way to defray that cost, especially when they're early in the career and may not be able to afford it. So that's what the goal is there, is to individualize that professional learning from those initial license 1, 2, and 3 stages until the teacher meets that license 4 expert teacher stage.
And kind of as a follow-up note, the model proposes using micro-credentials as one measure of teacher skill and mastery. How do you see that working in terms of, early career teachers and advancing through the levels?
Right. So there's 2 ways that micro-credentials could play a role in this model. And one is the general professional learning. So teachers that hold, and just for the sake of context, a CPL, what's licensed for in the new model, what we think of as a CPL. Those teachers today have to earn 8 continuing education credit hours in order to renew their license. And what micro-credentials does for us is allows us another opportunity for professional learning for those teachers. And it has the added benefit of, as Erin mentioned earlier, it really takes that next step in professional learning to application in the classroom. So then you're seeing that learning actually manifest in the presence of students in relation to their learning, rather than just, I went to the training and I got the certificate that I sat through that 8 hours of training. So we would love to leverage something like micro-credentials for the general professional learning for license renewal. But then on the front end, and I think Dr. Ennis, addressed some concerns about how do we use these for early career teachers. And so the question is, can we develop a set of foundational micro-credentials that could be used in lieu of the praxis testing for teachers? In other words, can I demonstrate that I know the content in my subject area to a level that's comparable to what the praxis would measure? And if you think about the Chad Bean story, so that's what he was advocating for. Can I show you that I know how to do this with my kids rather than passing a praxis exam? And so that's kind of, there's 2 ways that we're seeing that micro-credentials will work in this process, as being an alternative to the praxis testing for teachers. And this is particularly important because we know that those that are not meeting, or that praxis is a barrier, are largely minority candidates to the teaching profession. And what we see is, though we see the disparity in their pass rates for praxis, we don't see that same disparity in their effectiveness with students. And that's a really important thing, because we don't want to couch this as lowering the standards, because the evidence tells us that those teachers are creating high standards for their students and they're meeting the state expectation for being effective teachers. It's the test that's causing the problem, not the teachers. And so that's the idea of how micro-credentials could be leveraged as another way to demonstrate your competency to hold the license.
So this is for anyone, but thinking about, and Tom, you alluded to this a little bit about how our teachers are coming in different ways into the profession. But when we're thinking about professional advancement accounts, why is it so crucial at this time in education for those to be available? Don't all jump at once.
So, well, I'll jump in because I have a weird way of thinking about this. One of the things that we really like to know is, what is the impact of professional learning on the teacher as we think about their impact on students? Like, is the PD giving us what we want to? Is it moving teachers forward in terms of their effectiveness? This is a really big question, and and I don't think there's been a lot of definitive research on this. And if we link professional learning dollars to that teacher and track them through that process of moving forward in terms of their effectiveness, however we're defining effectiveness broadly, then we could start to understand what PD works for teachers and what PD doesn't seem to be very effective for teachers. It's that connection between the dollars, the individual, and the way they're moving through that licensure process and building their effectiveness as a teacher that I think could really help us understand what works in helping teachers move forward in terms of professional dollars, where if we can show more impact, let me preface this, my personal philosophy is if we can show more impact of the PD dollars on the effectiveness of students, on the impact of students and the effectiveness of teachers, my hypothesis is we'll unlock more dollars for professional learning for teachers.
It's hard to make the connection from a district level between the effectiveness of PD, like you've seen the impact in the classroom. You've tried a lot of different things in CMS to try to measure that and to try to track it. For a large district, we have 9,000 teachers. How do you make sure the professional development that we're doing district-wide is showing up in every classroom and having impact on students? We can look at student data, but the relationship is indirect. It could have been because of the professional development. It also could have been because of something else, right, within the system. So if we track attendance, we track perception data, we track, will you implement this in your classroom? Yes, we've even followed up with people afterwards, like, are you doing this? But we still haven't been able to truly track the impact of professional development on the teacher practice and then on student outcomes. So micro-credentials do help with that because the application to the classroom is part of a micro-credential. I think they also honor the fact that learning doesn't come from one place. I don't attend one professional development, go into my classroom, and the whole world is wonderful and great now, and my students are soaring, right? There are lots of ways that teachers learn. They learn from each other. They learn from a peer down the classroom or down the hallway. They learn from a YouTube video. They learn from modules. They learn from in-person learning. They learn from their administrators, right? There's lots of different ways that we get new knowledge and we learn and we try things in our classroom. And so micro-credentials do honor that also. Yes, there's modules included and there's videos and there's readings, but you're also able to bring in everything else that you already have in your toolbox. And you're also able to talk to the teacher down the hallway and get new ideas as well. So I think that's a really important part of when we talk about professional development and what teachers need.
So Jackie and Erin, you may be able to speak to this. How can districts and EPPs engage in the creation of micro-credentials and also the use?
We're always interested in partnering with our local partners, it could be statewide, just as we did partnering together across the state to form these for the technology for the EPP faculty. Well, I can see us getting together representatives, and particularly, I like that area you're talking about having something where it is standardized. And one thing we have run into with our micro-credentials, we've done a really good job. We put together 4 units, and then we had outside evaluators come in and give us feedback on those units. Then we improved the units, then we've made 4 more units. And so the unit is kind of like a unit of study to guide somebody through. They can choose how they go through it. And at the end, they do something to demonstrate that they now have this new knowledge or skill. But we don't have an entity right now that evaluates what person. We haven't had anybody submit yet. We're still in the planning stages. So we don't have a way of evaluating what they turn in. And I think that's really crucial if you're going to make sure that it's going to be high standard work. If somebody just turns in to me and says, okay, I've done this, I've earned my credential, how do we know? So, if we could have a body where we could work together, and our idea with our project was to have somebody who's kind of in charge, and oversees maybe different peers who might volunteer to be on a board to review. Or maybe, or paid, maybe we have people who do this like this a part-time job. You review what's turned in. So it's an outside evaluator instead of just somebody who did the actual teaching or is maybe the principal or administrator in the building. What do you think as a public school person?
Critical part of developing micro-credentials is the rubric and how you evaluate whatever the product is that is learning to show demonstrate mastery. The rubric part, we can add the content in pretty easily, right? We can find research, we can find videos, all the things, modules. The rubric and how we're evaluating is critical. And that's where the conversations come in. And that's where you grapple with other people. Like if it's a coaching micro-credential, what is it that we're looking for that considers somebody a master in coaching? That's not an easy question to answer with a group of people around the table. We really have to get down to it and decide what does that skill actually mean? What are we looking for in the classroom? That's where we spent a lot of time into developing micro-credentials on that rubric part. And if micro-credentials are going to be reciprocated across districts or states, that means we have to be in agreement around what we mean by a coaching micro-credential or data analysis micro-credential or whatever the skill set might be. And maybe that's connected to an evaluation tool, I'm not sure, but I think that part's great.
So I want to open it up to you all if you have any questions for our esteemed panelists in terms of micro-credential concept, professional advancement accounts for professional development. Any questions from you all? Don't be shy.
I guess I just want to add to what Erin was just talking about, that some consideration is that we almost need a little bit more guidance around data defining professional learning, because especially if we're going to start allowing things to go across districts. I have been in 3 LEAs at this point in my career, one in which it was the Oprah Winfrey Show, and every time you sat down, you got a CEU. And it's kind of like, well, was this really professional learning, or was this just a meeting or a technical training? Because did it advance me in a way that I can now positively impact children or align to the professional teaching standards in which my license is created from? And then in other districts, they have a very well thought out process and procedure in place in defining and providing CEUs. And I think that, when you're looking at about 110 districts across the state, there's huge variance in what's allowed to be a CEU.
Even assigning a CEU to a micro-credential is extremely challenging.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's not based on hours and seat time.
Right.
So it's very challenging. That's been a challenge for us.
And it's really funny because that's the way we think, like when we first came in, I was looking back through some of my notes last night when we were deciding we wanted to do the micro-credentials. And we said the person would do 10 hours. And, then we brought it back to our group and we got to thinking about it and laughing about it, that's what we were trying to get away from, was how many hours you spend on it, but what is the product? And like you say, then how do we evaluate it with a rubric? And who's going to evaluate it with that rubric? And how much time does that take? And you can evaluate things on surface level, or you can evaluate things that go really deeply. And I think that's something that, it just really makes me think, and especially with beginning teachers, you don't want it just to be, oh, well, I went in and I saw this, check them off, they've got that, they are done. But how do you get that? And we did work with the Friday Institute. That was a big help for us in developing rubrics and developing the ways we evaluate that. This one, big challenge.
Dr. Horn, you had your hand up first, and then we'll go back here.
And so I appreciate it. And this kind of goes back to Tom, what you were sharing about it being an alternative way for candidates to demonstrate performance in lieu of praxis. But I think as we talk about micro-credentials, we always talk about the coupling of kind of the instruction piece with the demonstration of the knowledge. And so how would that look? Because we've not seen micro-credentialing used as a way for initial licensure anywhere in our country. but the idea that it could be used in lieu of praxis. So how would you uncouple those? So that, like, if a candidate went through a traditional preparation program but couldn't pass the praxis, could they use the micro-credentialing, but then would they still have to go through kind of all of that instructional piece to then be able to demonstrate it if they're already able to demonstrate it based on their instruction in the EPP? Does that make sense?
So let me make sure
Yeah.
I'm understanding. That was a little bit roundabout, so I'm going to try to say it again. So I'm a candidate that completed a traditional preparation program, and in lieu of praxis, I am going to take a micro-credential, and I successfully passed that. Then I can, meeting all the other requirements, would I be able to convert my license to a CPL?
Well, I think my question was more about the coupling of the instruction that happens before the demonstration in a micro-credential. Like, as a candidate, would I be able to just jump to the demonstration piece?
So you're asking, is the pathways model supposing a situation or an environment where a teacher would no longer be required to do an educator preparation program and could simply demonstrate the requirements for the license, regardless of where they got that learning? As long as you can demonstrate, we don't care where you got the learning.
Well, and then also the other side of it, though, if I went through an EPP, do I have to sit through the learning again in order to demonstrate it if I'm not able to demonstrate it on the practice test?
All right, so let me address the first one. To my knowledge, there is no, in the pathways model, there's no contemplation that the micro-credentials for the purposes of licensure would be used as an alternative to traditional or residency preparation, or even alternative preparation for a teacher. I have not heard that outside of just conversations and musings within some of the things. I've never heard that put forward as a policy recommendation. So on the second one, if I think what you're getting at is, if I go through a traditional preparation program or even an alternative preparation program and do a series of courses, would that still require me to go through the micro-credentialing process to demonstrate that I did in fact learn what's on my transcript, basically, to put it simply? My response to that, from my understanding of the model, is insofar as you have to have that validation in any other way. So right now, our teachers that go through a traditional program take a content praxis and take the EdCPA to demonstrate their pedagogy. In the same way, a teacher would have that opportunity after completion of the traditional program to somehow externally validate that that program provided them with the expertise in content and pedagogy and move forward, is my response to that. But that's a really,
Yeah.
yeah,
When we talk about
I see what you're
micro-credentialing,
saying now. And
they're coupled, the instruction piece is coupled with the evaluation of what they've learned. And so would there be the uncoupling of that, because they would have gotten the instruction through their traditional preparation program?
The way I would answer that, I think, is insofar as in terms of licensure. Now, this is separate from general professional learning. Insofar as we're talking about potential for licensure, the instruction that you're referring to has to come from a state board approved preparation program. I think that's inherent in the model. That's the current state, and I think that would be the future state but yes, decoupling we have a very strong coupling between EPP and taking praxis and EdCPA. That is very strongly coupled. Yes, I think this model does sever that particular relationship and says, you're still going to do this, but you can do praxis, you can do micro-credentials, you could do this, you could do, whatever the realm of demonstration of that learning is that allows for the license.
So we'll take your question, and then we're going to have a little bit of group discussion time because I know there are a lot of questions, and maybe we can bring it back then. And we'll
try to get to yours too.
I love this idea and love that y'all and Charlotte-Mecklenburg have already been doing some of it, that it's already happening in some universities. As a former AP, I'm wondering if there's any discussion about aligning things with nieces, such that if you've got a teacher who's struggling in a particular area, there could be a place where the state micro-credentials are, and we could, as an administrator in a building, could suggest that a teacher use some of their PD money to take particular micro-credentials aligned to these particular areas, which can also help them improve the student impact and also with their teacher effectiveness, the scores that they're getting for their evaluations. Is that anything that's been talked about?
I would hope you do more than suggest when it comes to directed PD for early career teachers. I think one of the goals of this program is that we are maintaining that the EPP and the LEAs, PSUs, sorry, are the best kind of overseers of those professional learning funds. So, you know, we're not just handing a teacher a check for $2,500. What we're doing is putting it in the hands of the PSU, and the teacher comes to PSU and says, this is what I need. This is what I want to do. The PSU makes that determination. And so that they are engaged in things that are hopefully are going to yield good outcomes and advance them. So yeah, I'm with you on that. But I think other pieces of this, I would look to somebody who's actually implementing. All this is theoretical in my head. So I would turn to the practitioners to see how they're dealing with that.
I would say,
It's like, put her right on the spot, right?
we have our micro credentials right now are just with our advanced teaching roles. And so they are aligned to their evaluation tool, but I think what you're saying is genius and would make sense. Wouldn't it be great if our evaluation tool matched professional development that we had and could give teachers quality feedback and direct them to additional learning that went along with that? And all of that would be really high quality and help move the data for our teachers. So yeah, we are aligned to their evaluation system, but we haven't done any work directly with teachers yet, micro credentials in the same way that we're doing with advanced teaching roles.
To your question, we're gonna adjust here for this last part.
That's fine. You're okay.
Get it?
Real quick, let's say Dr. Tomberlin, just I'll follow up from that. Then the EPP would be the one that would sign off or that would evaluate that micro credential and award that in place of the praxis. Is that correct?
No, so that's a great question. So there would have to be some. So the awarding of the license is under the authority of the State Board of Education. And so the determination that micro credential, whatever that set of micro credentials is that one could use in lieu of praxis testing. The way I think about it, and I think the way that the subcommittees working on this model are thinking about it, is that is a standard set of micro-credentials. Like it's different from the professional learning where Charlotte-Meck's creating their own micro-credentials. This would be an established set of micro-credentials that says everybody is going this route is going to do this, and there'd be some external validation of yes, you passed or you failed, much like the praxis or the EdCPA. You know, the EPPs don't score the praxis exam for their students, or they don't score the EdCPA for their students. That's done by some external. But yeah, that's the way I would think about it.
And I'm sorry, just the CMS question, just maybe it's more logistical. How do you house it? Do you have a blueprint for just like what Tom was talking about for your teachers that are thinking about being an ATR? Is there a set curriculum or set requirement of the ones that they check off through there? And then how do you house that internally to keep that for the candidates that I know you have in CMS?
Yes, that's been quite a conversation too. We use the Flipboard to house all of our micro credentials, but we've also tried to build them within our LMS and Canvas and do them ourselves. Either way, there's a funding implication if we housed it ourselves and built it. Got to have evaluators to be able to evaluate them, and that takes people and money. Blue Board costs money. And it's outside evaluators, but they also provide some additional coaching and feedback that we found attractive. And didn't have the internal capacity to do. So that's where we house them and keep track of them within our advanced teaching department right now. There would have to be a better system if all 9,000 of our teachers are looking at taking micro credentials. Right now we have a small group, right? And we do have a certain path for them and micro credentials that we need to take. So that it is defined